Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today, whether you're watching now while it's live, November 7th, or you're watching later on in the day. My name is Trisha Tate. I am CEO of FinCore. We are a fractional CFO and accounting services company. And I'm also author of Dancing with Numbers, Grow a Financially Healthy Business, and Choreograph the Life That You Want. And this is the Dancing with Numbers in Real Life series. This series came about after writing my book, and within my book, um, I followed the lives of 20 entrepreneurs who are self-proclaimed non-numbers people, and I wanted to share their journey navigating money and numbers from the beginning of their business through the end of their life. And in the interviews, I found so many stories interesting, and I figured, why not bring that to real life and have conversations with similar business owners? The goal of this series is to normalize conversations around money and numbers. So I want to introduce today Kate Luzio, who's founder and CEO of Luminary. Luminary is a community that I am happy to be a part of here in New York, and it's also a co-working space. But I know I'm not going to do it justice, so I want Kate to formally introduce herself and the community that is Luminary.
Hey, Trisha, great to be here. And so very proud to have you as a member of Luminary, as you know. So I started Luminary now. Next week, it'll be almost 6 years ago when we soft
Congratulations.
launched here in New York City. So we are now a global professional networking education platform for women and allies. So we've been very clear from our mission from the beginning that we can't do this alone to advance women in the workforce. We need our allies. And so we are gender inclusive. We do have a large physical location in New York City, but we also have a partner network around the country and abroad, close to 40 spaces that our members have reciprocal access to. And then we have a very robust digital platform, thanks to the pandemic, where our global community that's now in more than 30 countries have access to our live programming, our content, our members directory, and sort of all that is Luminary. And last but not least, we also have a live experience on the road that happens in 8 cities each year. Headed to Nashville next week. So if you're in the Nashville area, and then in the middle of December, we'll be in Miami. And then we'll turn around and do it all over again next year, where we're bringing content, community, and programming to our community and beyond, and not just entrepreneurs, those in the traditional workforce, those in transition, sort of all of what we call that power middle that's navigating their path.
So, all of that good stuff in a community that is physical, digital, and global. So, I want to dive right in. For those who similarly want to build community and are at a starting place, I want you to talk to me about not just the start of your business, but how have you built community? Can you walk us through that process?
Sure. I've been reflecting on this lately as obviously the world and the country continues to go through its challenges. I think I've been building community since at a very young age. I was very much an athlete growing up, so always a part of team sports, always the joiner academically, both in all through high school and in college. And then even as I entered into my career, most of that being in finance for almost 20 years, I was always building community within the banks, whether it was through our women's networks, through our clients, small groups. I called them whisper networks. But more importantly, just getting people together to support one another, to discuss like the real topics. That really led me to building this community as what we know as Luminary now. What I saw 6, 7 years ago is really no different than what I see today. We've got to come together. There are lots of communities for lots of different audiences, but one of the ways that I really benefit and learn more and have a real knowledge transfer is when I get different perspectives from different people, audiences, backgrounds. And so That's my focus, building community. I also think you've got to walk the walk every single day. And it's not easy. You don't build it and they will come. This is something that you have to work at every single day. And I think we're just getting started at Luminary.
Wow, just getting started, and we are a global space. Now, was this part of your intention in building the business? Now I want to talk about building the business. Was this part of your intention to build a global community, or were there different moments in the evolution of the business that inspired, what you've grown?
Yeah, so in the original business plan that was written for Luminary that I wrote, there was no idea that it would be digital, global. There would be no virtual. I don't even think we had sort of digital platform in there. So the pandemic turned that all on its head. A year into to we were a year old when the pandemic happened, and so even before the pandemic shut New York down and our space down, we went online. We just knew we had to be there for our community. It was Women's History Month, and we had a lot of programming already scheduled. And so we said, well, for as long as this lasts a couple of weeks, we're going to be online and support that community. Plus, people needed to connect, as you remember. And so, no, that was not. I always wanted to scale the business, likely potentially be in other cities. That wasn't necessarily going to be putting up a physical Luminary space in every city, but this was not the intent when I first started the business. So I think one of the things that I've learned in my career as a banker, but now as an entrepreneur, is you've always got to be adapting to what's thrown at you, and you've got to move as quickly as you possibly can. Cash allows you to do that. Decision making allows you to do that. A great team allows you to do that. So we've just continued to adapt over the past 6 years, and that's really allowed us the flexibility in scaling how I wanted to scale the business profitably, sustainably, without taking on outside capital or taking on outside investors that have a say in what we're doing for our community.
So you mentioned a number of things. So you had one business plan, because I know you do a business plan boot camp.
Yep.
So you had one business plan in the beginning of your business. Somewhere along the way, you had to shift your plan. So our audience are mostly business owners who've been in the trenches, been doing this for years. Can you talk to being a business owner and having to shift your business plan or your operational plan in the middle of what you've been doing for 1 year, 5 years,
Yeah.
10 years? Where do you start? Do you start with numbers? Do you start with marketing? Do you start with people? Like, what part of the plan do you start with?
So I always, and you and I connect on this so deeply, Trisha. I always start with the numbers, right? The numbers are outside of sort of your value proposition and your product or service. Your numbers are the most important thing that carries your business through every single month. And so for me, going back to that sort of March of 2020, my then COO and I sat down and said virtually and said, all right, here, where are we? What's our cash flow look like? What happens if this stays like this for quite some time? We had no idea. To what's going out every month from an expense standpoint, but taking a hard look at the numbers and then thinking holistically about our customer, which are our members, both on the B2C and the B2C side, B2B and B2C side. So I always start with the numbers and where we're at. That gives you where your position. What can you do? Do you have any flexibility? Can you take a little of that cash and put it back into something else, or try something else? And so in those first couple of months, that was not the case. We had to make some tough decision around staffing. We had to make some tough decision around just even vendors that we had. And then once we were stabilized, I think from a cash perspective, we could really think about how did we want to adapt the business model that wasn't a Band-Aid, right? Just to get us through a very difficult time. And I would say crisis. But how did that now really transform the business in a different way. And so always start with the numbers. I think it's really important. And I say this in every business plan boot camp that I lead, which is every month.
Mm-hmm.
A business plan is a living document. It does not go in a drawer and that's it. And that's your business plan for the rest of your business, right? Your business ebbs and flows, your business changes, it adapts, it could pivot. You've got to be doing a refresh. One, whether there is a completely new product opportunity, two, a new audience, revenue stream, et cetera. Certainly in a time of crisis. And if you can't do your business plan regularly or even once a year, then I encourage business owners, founders, entrepreneurs to do a SWOT analysis pretty regularly, once a quarter, 2 times a year. And if you have a team, it's a great exercise to bring your team into, because it gets different perspectives.
Thank you. So thank you for sharing that. And two important points you brought up in the beginning is, of course, you looked at your numbers, but you also looked at what the customer need was at the time.
Yeah.
And you did it with your COO. Now, for those who don't necessarily have a COO, right? How can they go about getting that kind of support, like a strategic partner, a strategic thought partner, or an operational specialist or something like that to help strategize on what that looks like?
So I think, and I was fortunate to have Erica Lerner, who was our COO, who's still our strategic advisor, general counsel on our board. So she was as close to I could have had as a co-founder. She had been with me since day one. But if you don't have that, if you have an accountant, a bookkeeper, somebody that you can trust to sort of, again, go through that strategic plan and those numbers, I think that's really important. If it's just you, if you are a solopreneur and sort of weathering that, I think you still need to tap into advisors. We've talked about that. Even, again, a bookkeeper just to go through where you're at in your cash position. If you, and you should have an accountant. That was the second thing we did. As soon as we went through those, we went and talked to our accountant and said, okay, where are we going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months? So you really can tap into those networks. The last thing that I would say is, if you should have a business banker, depending on the size of your business, tap into the resources that your bank offers. They are not going to offer tax advice, but they can certainly offer advice around where you're at, where your projections are. And again, back to those numbers, that's a really important part of building your business.
As a fractional CFO and a team of fractional CFOs, I am finding a lot that we are not just helping our clients strategically plan for the future and do forecasts or even just get transparency in their numbers, but we are helping them shift their financial operations, because the numbers always reveal the holes in the business, and it leads to a certain decision making, and that decision making is affecting the operation. So I've found that we sometimes, I and the rest of my team have to wear the hat of controller, right? At the very beginning of any relationship, we have to make sure that there's transparency in the numbers. And then we hold the hat of CFO, where we're doing strategic planning. And then we hold the hat of like financial operations manager in conjunction with the COO. So to your point, having a team of strategic advisors, whether it's your COO, your CPA, your banker, your CFO, is super critical in shape shifting the business whenever necessary. So you talked about cash flow, which for me, whether you have $50,000, $5 million, $50 million, $5 billion, is one of the most critical metrics to be paying attention to in business. I would love for you to share with us, what other metrics do you look at on a regular basis for the type of business that you have?
So we're looking, obviously, I would say my poor fractional CFO. I'm looking at the numbers every day just to see where our cash position is, but more importantly, and you know this, that I'm always very focused on expenses. I think oftentimes, we see money coming in. It's like, great, I've got all this cash in there. Now I can go spend all this cash. So projections for me are really important. We do a monthly financial statement looking back. We do a forward looking every quarter, and sometimes even monthly, depending on what the ebb and flow of our business, especially around, there is seasonality, right? So summertime membership kind of dips, and also our corporate business, because it's the summer, like most businesses. And then certainly as you go into the holidays, corporate renewals are usually towards the end of the year, first quarter. So we want to be prepared there, but we want to, again, extend the life of that cash that's coming in. So looking at that pretty consistently. Again, that expense management, I am very focused on what's going out every month. And also, not just what's going out, how do we reduce expenses, right? Where are we not being efficient? My head of product is continually looking at our software stack for the size of the business that we are. What does that look like? But also not forgetting that we have to invest in the business. We have to invest in people, and just making sure that we can make those decisions with confidence. It all goes back again to the numbers.
Yeah. So, looking at your membership numbers, right? Corporate and individual and the different tiers that you have, expenses. I mean, you have a building in New York, so there's
Yeah.
rent.
I have a very expensive building in New York.
It's beautiful, but I'm sure it's expensive. And you mentioned bootstrapping. So do you take on any debt on your balance sheet, even if it's a line of credit or a facility?
So yeah, and you and I talked about this when we were speaking at the Inc. 5000 a few weeks ago. So yes and no. So I think there's a thing called good debt, and there's a thing called bad debt. So bootstrap the business, to start it back in
Yeah.
2018, 2019. And I have not personally put any additional capital into the business since then. We did during 2020, obviously we got PPP. We had a sizable business by that point. And then we had the opportunity to take on the EIDL loan. And so for us, the EIDL loan, when I looked at that, whatever, 3.5% rate for 30 years. That was a rate that we'll likely never see again in the history of us as business owners.
I've heard you say that before.
Yes. So, and as a former banker, it was okay. Let's take this. Even if you're paying it off pretty quickly, it was a great tool. So did the EIDL. I thought that was a great opportunity for the business, and it was also a little bit of a cushion to get us through a harder time. But we also have a revolving line of credit. Doesn't mean you tap into it. It's a great safety net. Once I think you've proven yourself over a couple of years, you've got obviously the right numbers, and you've got a banker that and you've built a relationship with. Those lines of credit, those revolving lines of credit are great tools. Again, just to provide a little bit of a buffer or safety net. Doesn't mean you ever have to touch it. It also means if you touch it and you've been in a cash crunch for a week, you can pay that back 5 days later once that cash comes in. So I think that's an important part for business owners just to think about. Oftentimes I hear, I don't want any debt. It's like there's such a thing called bad debt, and there's a thing called good debt. We also we have two great business credit cards with two banks that allow us again to optimize working capital and extend the life of our cash. So, but those are being paid every month, and so we want to continue to have great credit. We want to continue to have a very healthy balance sheet, and we want to continue to be profitable. But a great example, Trisha, is last year we acquired the Crew in the end of the third quarter, early fourth quarter, and so I took on 5 more people. I took on a new platform that we had to integrate into Luminary's platform. So you are taking on a unexpected, because we weren't expecting to acquire the Crew, but it was a great opportunity. And so when we looked at the numbers, it was like, okay, we are going to be in a less healthy cash position, but we also we know what was coming in receipts wise, like the AR from fourth quarter and into the first quarter, that would be, we would be still in a good cash position. So I think knowing where we're at, knowing where we're projecting to be, right, and a healthy projection. And I do 20% growth, I do flat, and then I do, we're not growing at all. We're declining. Those are the projections that I do every quarter.
So you touched on a bunch of things, and I think as a benefit of being a banker and very tied and connected and okay and having a good, what I call a fun, exciting relationship to numbers, you were able to dance with your numbers in such a way that you've been leveraging it for decision making, which
Yeah.
is beautiful. And something that you mentioned brings me back to something I wrote about, which is you said a lot of us say, I don't want to take on debt. To be specific, I have found that it's a lot of women business owners that say, I don't want to take on debt, however they've gained that fear of debt. And in my book, I wrote about, I interviewed someone from SCORE, and I did a couple of other pieces of research. And I found that women business owners unfortunately underperform. Part of the reason is because of lack of financial education or lack of financial resources. Of course, there are other socioeconomic gaps. I mean, just in the 1970s or 1980s, we got the right to even have a business bank account and have credit. But there are other things that we can do. And I feel like financial education is one of the things that are allowing us to underperform in terms of our business growth and strength. And I asked someone from SCORE why they thought that was, and she said, I think numbers remind people of 8th grade math class. When you have a quiz that you're going to fail, they are ultimately afraid to look stupid, especially when it comes to their business. So they think, I'm not good at math, so I will avoid dealing with it. And so I've heard people say this, like when I'm prospecting clients, a lot of women business owners, and they're trying to defend them, they're trying to explain their need, but also defend, I'm good at math. It's just I'm having issues with this, right? So I want to ask you, how did you, besides the fact that you were in banking, before banking, what were some of the earliest influences around money, whether it's in childhood, teenage life, or whatever? What were some of the lessons that you learned? Who taught it to you that helped you in your relationship to money?
Yeah, and I'll let me be clear on my side. I hate math.
Okay.
Like I mean, if you talk to my mother, my brothers, my partner, he would go, she's the worst, right? When I have to do a tip on a way for a server, I hate math. I don't like numbers, but what I know is that I have to know my numbers to be successful, not just as a business owner in the businesses that I ran at the banks that I worked at. It wasn't just, I just did my job. I had to look at every single month our numbers, right? So I liken it to particularly that credit card statement that comes in January after the holidays. You're like, I don't want to open this because I know I overspent, right? Or after that vacation, that big vacation you went on, you're like, oh my
That's
God.
right.
It felt so good spending it at the time. So it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. I get it. You're going to feel crappy, but you just got to do it. When I grew up, so I am a Gen Xer through and through, and I am a cash hoarder because of the way I grew up. So my father was an FBI. He's a retired FBI agent. My mom is a retired teacher. There was no business around us that didn't have somebody in business in my family, in my immediate family. What I knew from a very early age was my parents were saving for my college. That was like, we are saving for your college so you can go to college. Best gift they ever gave my younger brother and I was saving for our college. I had no debt when I came out of college, but how they saved, yes, they've scrimped and saved on their own side, but every single money, piece of money that came in, my birthday, from my grandparents. It was like we held that bill for 4 seconds and then it was whisked away into a savings account. That's what I learned, that you've got to save, you've got to be prepared. And so when I graduated from college and my dad said, "This is the best gift you'll ever have. You have no debt." I don't think you really can, and you don't really understand. Like, you're okay. I'm graduated. I'm an adult. But that was, and so for me, it was also, you've got to pay off your credit card every month. I learned the hard way during college. On college campuses, this is in the 90s. There were so many credit cards for kids. And they were $500 limits, and it was meant to help you build credit. But what it didn't teach you, there was no financial literacy. And so I remember calling my older brother at one point in college and saying, "I don't understand. I'm paying my credit card bill every month, but the balance isn't going down." And he said, "What are you paying?" I said, "I'm paying the minimum payment." And so I learned about interest. I learned about no. You're just paying basically the interest, but there was no financial literacy. So I think that makes you feel like you're not as smart as everyone else. And so you're less likely to ask questions. And then that feeling just grows and grows and grows. So those are my sort of early memories of money. And I think that's also what has also led me to be this cash hoarder. It's like, I gotta save, I gotta save, I gotta save. I think definitely over the years, because I wasn't a financial advisor, I was in the corporate and investment bank. I'm not a money person in that way. I probably could have put my money to work much sooner and work harder for me. Took going through a terrible divorce to get there, and then obviously starting Luminary.
Wow. So when you started your business, can you talk to me about your journey with money from starting your business and some of the lessons you took from childhood and your college years into your current relationship to money?
Yeah, when I wrote the business plan, and then pretty soon after that, did the numbers and looked at the financials, and really I had no idea, right? It was like sort of this is what I know from the comps in the market. We had a number of other businesses, like the Wing had been in business for a couple of years by that point. So I could only know what I knew as far as like, is this going to work? And if it works, this is what I think we can build. But what I was very important in starting the company was, this is the runway of cash that I have. Right. So I am putting X amount of dollars into it to start the business. Right. That's that startup capital cost. And then I'm putting in X amount of the business and X amount of money into the business to build the business. My estimation based on the numbers was I was going to get to a point where I didn't need to fund anymore. And again, to the business's credit, my team, myself, that initial capital was the only capital we've invested into the business. Now the business is reinvesting in itself. And that's how I've chosen to build the business. And obviously, you and I've talked about it quite a bit. When can I hire? How many people can I hire? What do they cost? When can I pay myself? That was a big conversation with myself. When should I pay myself? My goal was to pay myself at the end of the first year if we were doing well. We were. January of 2020, that same COO and I sat down. I was like, whoa, all right. We're doing well. This was a great year. And then the pandemic hit, and I realized, okay, the right decision for the business is, obviously I can't pay myself, and hopefully by the end of the year that will happen. And that happened by September of 2020. So you have to make very quick and sometimes very tough decisions, both for the business, yourself, if you have a team. And that's what I'm focused on sort of all the time, is how quickly do we make decisions that benefit the business, the team, but also the community, because the only reason we're here is to serve our customers, which is our community, both on the individual and corporate side.
So that's an interesting conversation, because in my in my program, The Path to Financial Freedom, I have the 6-step method of how you take a growth idea into a financially feasible into a financially feasible thing. And the first principle is pay yourself first. And in this case, you, of course, thought about growing the business the first couple of years before you paid yourself. And a lot of people struggle with being able to pay themselves at the risk of their business and their team and their employees. But I feel like if you put a goal in place that by this time or by this metric you'll pay yourself, I think that is a smart way to go about it, because you're still holding yourself accountable and you know what you need to do to be able to pay yourself, because the business doesn't exist without you, and you're putting blood, sweat, and tears
Yeah, yeah.
into it.
Agreed. And I that none of that sort of, I wasn't going to pay myself until was because I didn't value the contribution. I absolutely agree. I think different businesses I had to pay starting out immediately day one of the business, 8 to 10 people.
Yeah.
Right? Just to run the business. It started as a physical location. I need people to run the space. I needed people to help, drive programming, all
Okay.
the community side of the business. My COO, who was helping to run. We have 19 vendors that we utilize every month in the space for different reasons. So I knew that first and foremost, I had to pay my team. Right. And so then it was, okay, by the end of that year, let's look at our, where I think from a projections. And that's when I decided then, okay, that's going to be my pay. The nice thing about being a business owner, I think, and I'm 100% owner of Luminary, is that also I had to get my arms around, or my head around, the fact that I was no longer a salaried employee. And so I think when you leave corporate and you start a business, you're still in that mentality of like the bi-weekly paycheck, the benefits, etc. I learned really from my accountant that we started with, and they're still our accountant, is you're not a W-2 employee. So you can take a distribution that looks different if you want every month, depending how the business is doing. And so does that distribution month to month look different than year end? Potentially, if we're profitable at the year end and I can take some more money out of the business. Or do I just say, I'm going to leave it and reinvest in the business? So I think that's another sort of mental conversation you have to have. And also remember that one month you may pay yourself X. The next month you may have a great month. You've looked at your expenses. You've looked at the next couple of months. You've got a great pipeline. You can pay yourself a little more, but also make sure you're having those conversations with your accountant around what that's going to do, particularly for your taxes as well at the end of the year.
Absolutely. And so I think it's important to have the conversation with your CPA, but I'm also sure you're having a conversation with your CFO.
Oh, absolutely.
Of
Yes.
how much you can afford to pay in terms of payroll,
Yes.
benefits for your people, as well as a distribution to yourself, and different scenarios of how you grow the businesses, affects that. But yes, you definitely want to cover payroll and benefits. I want to switch gears to your acquisitions. You've done 2 acquisitions, and when we were at Inc. 5000 in Palm Springs, California, which was a wonderful experience. And I'm going to come back to even how we got there. But when I was there, I sat in on a panel with 2 women business owners who sold businesses, which I feel like those stories are so few and far between. At least we hear
Michelle,
them.
right? Michelle was one of them.
Yes, Michelle was one of them. And they're so few and far between. But I would love for you to talk to us about sort of like your checklist of of decision making for, like, when did you know you were ready for acquisition, and what did you look for in making the decision to acquire these 2 opportunities?
Yeah, I think the first one was at the end of 2020, early 2021. So as you can imagine, I never thought in 2020 we would be in that position, I think. But both of the acquisitions that we've made have come to us, meaning I wasn't actively looking and said, oh, these are great. This looks like it would be a great fit for Luminary. In my network, which I think is really important, and that we put out into our networks. If we are looking to build and scale, that everything doesn't have to be done on our own. I'm a very big proponent of, looking at a combination of build and buy versus just build or just buy. So one is being open to conversations. If somebody does reach out to you and say, hey, listen, I think we'd be a great fit for you, then, entertain that. There's nothing I don't think there's anything bad that can come from having an open mind and having the conversation. However, once you are in that conversation, you have to really understand why would you buy it? One, financially, is that viable? But two, what does it get you? What are the gains? And so for us, it was looking at, is there a market fit from the companies that we were looking to acquire? Two, did it make good sense for our community and customers? What was the value add for our community and our customers, both whether it was B2B or B2C? And then three, does it make financial sense? I've seen companies that acquire and they overpay, or they put themselves in a very negative cash position just for the benefit of buying. And so you really, really, really need to look at your numbers as you're going through that. I'm going to give a great example. So in 2023, had we not acquired the Crew, we would have ended profitable, right? So we've been profitable 2021, 2022, 2023. I have that's not a negative. The reason we didn't end profitable is because we acquired the Crew and we took on expenses. But we quickly, reestablish the cash position. So you have to really look at what is it going to do for your customers? Is it going to add a new opportunity? Is it going to add new, your ability to serve your customers, new products or additive products? Two, can you afford it? And three, what are you really getting when you're acquiring? For me and the Crew, we're getting a new product offering. We're getting a new platform to integrate into ours. We're getting an incredible team. And all of that made sense for our business. And then the way we structured the deal with Tiffany Dufu made sense for her. I also want to go into any conversation is what's the win-win for both of us in this. And I think that's important to be very transparent. And now, because we've also been approached by others and that we haven't done, and they didn't make sense. And that you should be very okay with saying it doesn't make sense for us at this time, or this isn't the right fit for whatever product or service you're offering. So we're very open to it. And we are always looking in the market to see what's happening out there and how we can bring in more value for our community.
So as an outsider looking in, I've watched Luminary and what you've built evolve. And as for those who are in the audience who are either building community, have a physical space, and they're growing their business, what are some of the challenges that either you've faced in this time, in the past 6 years that you're able to share, or what are some of the challenges you've seen others face in building community or having a space?
I think no matter how well you're doing, I think you should be optimistically paranoid. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm always, again, going back to the numbers, focused on that. And I think part of that is that cash order mentality, right? I never want to be in a position where I go, I don't know if I'm going to make payroll. Like I have 20 something people every day that are relying on me to live their lives as a business. So I always want to make sure we're financially sound to be there. That doesn't mean that every business owner has the same mentality, and it doesn't mean that every business is the same. I think what I hear most from business owners, those that do have a team and they're growing, is their cash position and that ability to kind of continue to build without having to raise, or maybe I've got to continue to raise and raise and raise and raise. And that there's different kinds of, my business is different than a product business, as an example. The other thing that I hear often from founders is they think they've got a great business, but when you really peel back the layers, is it a viable long-term business? If you are a solopreneur and this is the number that you want to make, by the way, that's another mistake. I think a lot of people don't have a number that they are like, this is the number that I'm shooting for every year. I certainly do, personally and as a business. And so if you don't have that number, you have no goal to get to.
Right.
There's no North Star financially, and that's the viability of the business. So I think also it's okay if you've run a business and you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. We have to also be comfortable that, and I love Leslie Polizato, who ran the Donut Project in the West
We're going to
Coast.
have her on because I love when she spoke about that.
Right. And she's like, I ran it successfully for 10 years. And then I realized I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to do something different. And the media reaction in particular from women was like, oh, it didn't work. No, it worked. I just don't want to do it anymore.
Right. I love that.
Right. And that is okay. And we have to make the right decisions for our lives. And so whether you sell your business, you merge with another business, you close your business, you keep building your business for the rest of your life, that is your decision as the business owner. And I think we have to get comfortable with those decisions that we make for ourselves and our companies and ultimately our customers.
So I have 3 quick fire questions.
Yeah.
And it may or may not be quick, but 3 quick fire questions.
Okay.
In speaking to Leslie, she spoke up. I realized that there's a difference between building a brand and building a business. I got the same message from Gia, from the CEO of Gia at Inc. 5000. Difference between growing a brand and a business. What is your goal next for Luminary?
To continue to have more impact, right? I know, like I said in the beginning, we just got started. I mean, 6 years is a long time as a business owner, but it's also for what we do in our mission, it's just scratching the surface, right? And I think there is a lot of work to be done to support women and allies in business, women and allies in business ownership, and those in transition. And so we have literally, I mean, I feel like we've done a great job, but there's so much more impact to be had. So when I look at, I want to reach more women, reach more allies. I want to see more businesses thrive. I want to see more people moving through and moving up and around the corporate ladder. And I want to see those that are in transition kind of figuring out what that next step is. So that impact, that's what drives me every single day.
I love that. And to the extent that I can support you in the community in doing so, I am here to do so.
You do it every day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this is sitting in my heart, like right here to ask you, as a leader of 20 people and a community of 15,000 members, right? 15,000. What do you do to work through the tough moments or tough decisions about how do I transition the business, or just tough moments going on in society? What do you do for yourself to gear yourself up to be able to be supportive to 20 employees and 15,000 members?
So a lot of it is I have to tap into myself. Some of this is just a mental game of almost like tic-tac-toe that I play with myself. I mean, I'm a very competitive person, but I say this, I'm very competitive with myself. So some of the things that I struggle with or I have to work through, I've got to do that on my own. No matter who I ask or how many people pat me on the back, or I have to do that on my own. And that's been my whole life. However, I have a great group of, I'll call them advisors, that are friends, that are former colleagues in the financial services, that are founder friends that I can tap into to get their perspective. And I know anytime I go to those people, I will get real talk versus what I want to hear. And that's really important for me too, as we continue to build the business. And the third thing is I'm not a self-care person. I don't do massages. I don't do all of that. But I have found like two things that I have to make sure that I can take my mind off the business, and those things I lean into, and or not just the business, but what's happening in the world or something that's very heavy. I go to those two things, and that helps me kind of sort of distract myself from everything else.
I love that. And but retail therapy does help. Like it helped
Retail
me
therapy
yesterday.
helps. Absolutely. That's part of it. I do my little outfit of the day. And then I found over the last year and a half, that, we are all on our devices all the time. And so you can never escape. You can never escape social media or the business. And so
Right.
I started watching Korean dramas. And so
Really?
yes, that's my go-to. And so you cannot not pay attention. I don't do it in dubbing. I do it in subtitles. So, and I'm very invested. And Korean dramas, they are amazing, and they're like 16 to 20 episodes. So
Uh-huh.
you're in it for the long haul. And and that is my self-care.
That is funny. That's my mother's self-care too. She doesn't do a lot of emotion, but she watched what she calls strippedness TV. Whenever her mind is frazzled, she was like, I just gotta watch something that's like doesn't take a lot of thinking
Yeah.
and just makes me laugh. I love that. Korean dramas.
Yeah.
So Kate, this has been wonderful, this conversation. I know we could go on for a very long time. You started off as like an advisor mentor because you were on my virtual conference, Power Her Financials,
Yes.
where you were talking about growing a business beyond $1 million. And from then I've joined the community, and you have become a friend and an advisor. And so I thank you for sharing this space here as we shared the stage on Inc. 5000 at the conference. The very last question I have for you is, how would you describe the dance with your numbers? Be as creative as you want to be. How
Ooh.
today?
It, oh, it's like twerking. I'm thinking like it's not a waltz, it's not a salsa, it's like twerking. Like it's like fast, and then it's like okay, and then it's like fast. So that's not, and I'm not a great, I can't do that, but that's like what immediately came into my,
I love that.
so there you go.
I need to. If I ever write another addition to this, I'm gonna put twerking. So now I'm gonna sit here and mentally be like,
Yes, yeah. So enjoy.
I love I love that. Thank you, Kate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary. Thank you for being with us on Dancing with Numbers in Real Life. We literally started this in January. I went off intuition and my heart saying, how do I bring these live stories to the airwaves so that business owners out there who are growing their $1 million, six-figure business, what have you, don't feel alone. Everyone's having same issues, same conversations, and I want to normalize these conversations around numbers and money. Hopefully one day I could take it on the road. Hopefully I have Oprah Winfrey on this call
Yeah, there you go.
telling me how she grew her business. But thank you for your time today, and I'll see you before the end of the year. Thank
Thanks
you
for
all
having
for
me.
being here. Again, my name is Trisha Tate, CEO of FinCore. We're a fractional CFO company and author of Dancing with Numbers, Grow a Financially Healthy Business, and Choreograph the Life That You Want. If you have any questions for Kate, for me, no matter how simple, how complex, please drop them in the comments, DM me, message us on LinkedIn. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
Trisha.
day, Kate.